Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Adrian and today we are doing my August wrap up. So we're going to have a look at all the books that I read in the month of August and how I felt about them, and I'll give you a little bit of an idea about what they are and whether or not it's something you might enjoy reading yourself. So this month I'm going to go in chronological order, so with whatever I finished first I'm going to start with, and I'm going to work my way back towards the end of the month. It was not an amazing reading month for me in terms of number of books that I finished. I finished 7 books in August, but 2 of them are very short novellas. What I will say is I've also taken some pretty big chunks out of some chunky boys at the end of this month. So I'm about 2/3 of the way, maybe a little bit less, through To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini, and I'm also most of the way through The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. So there's a good, I don't know, almost 1,000 pages there that has not contributed to a finished book yet. So my wrap up in September will make it look like I have read a lot of books, I would imagine. But let's jump into what I have in fact finished in the month of August. The first of these being The Gods of War by Conor Gordon. So book number 4 in the Emperor series. This is a historical fiction set in the Roman Empire following the life of Julius Caesar and those around him at that similar time. For me, this book 4 was probably the best book in the series. I think I'm settling on a 4.5 star rating for The Gods of War, and I did really enjoy it. This and book 3 are definitely the peak of this series for me, as you will see a little bit later when we move on to one of the books I finished slightly later in this series. Now, I don't want to give you too much information about it because I don't want to spoil any of those earlier books. What I will say is that it is very much a multi-POV story, but we are following a few main characters who are well-known historical figures in the Roman Empire. And it is good fun. It's not always 100% historically accurate, but it is close enough. And actually reading the historical notes at the end by Conor Gordon are very interesting. I'm quite enjoying seeing what he's had to deviate to make it work as a story, and what is actually just basically fact as far as the historians can tell that he is telling us in the story. Very interesting. Next up is a very short novella. It might even be classed as a short story probably, by Sebastian de Castell. This is The Fox and the Bowman. This is unrelated to either of a series. This is not a Greatcoat story. It's not a Spellslinger story. This is just a standalone story, sort of a historically based fantasy. It is very short and it is very much a ideological piece, I would say. It is very philosophical and thoughtful and thought-provoking, with a slight magical tinge to things as well. Really enjoyable. I would definitely recommend it if you've got an afternoon or even an hour, probably less, to have a little bit of a read. Definitely enjoyable, definitely worth picking up if you enjoy short stories or novellas. I gave it 4 stars. Just a very nice, good read. Up next is Empire in Black and Gold. This is the first book in the Shadows of the Apt series by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I was reading this for Autumn of the Apt. I don't remember what it's called. The read along on Alan's channel over at the Library of Alexandria. I listened to this one on audiobook and I really enjoyed it. It is the world we are in is basically a world where humanity has sort of different subcultures, sort of almost subspecies in a way, where they are related to a particular insect. So these are very much human people, like these aren't bugs we're talking about, but they will often refer to themselves by what their insect that they take traits from is, whether that be beetles or wasps or flies, and they call these kindon. Yeah, so you can be a fly kindon or a mantis kindon, dragonfly kindon, all these kind of things, and you have a different sort of art, different ancestor art that comes with what kindon you are, which is an interesting take on sort of an idea on magic, but it's definitely not seen as magic in the world yet. This is just a natural thing that you are able to do because of what kindon you are, and I find that very interesting. The concept of this book is we are following essentially Stenwald Maker, who is a beetle kindon, and he is an aging spy master, and he is trying to get the lowlands, so that's where he is based, ready for what he sees as an an upcoming war with an empire, a wasp empire, that is, as far as he can tell, is invading, although the people he's trying to convince don't seem convinced that it's anything to worry about. So we follow him and his team of younger recruits that he's recruited from his college, as they try to set about working out what's going on and trying to prepare people for a war that they are sure is coming. Lots of fun, written very well. You can tell it's Tchaikovsky's first novel. It's not quite as smooth as some of his later stuff, but it was still a very enjoyable read. Got 4 stars from me. Really, really solid entry into the series. I'm very much looking forward to continuing this on. I believe Dragonfly Falling is book 2, which I am hopefully getting to this month with the rest of the guys who are here for this read along. Up next is my first foray into the City Watch subseries of Discworld. This was Guards. This was, just straight off, I'm going to tell you, this was a 4.5 star read for me. This is the best, or my favourite, Discworld that I've read so far, and the other two being Mort and Reaperman. One of the things that made this more of a success for me than the Death subseries is the characters I really loved, we got to spend a lot of time with. Whereas on the Death subseries, when I really wanted to spend lots of time with Death, we ended up following other people. This is Guards is a very funny book for me. It's definitely got that Monty Python feel, which for me is a big win. If you don't love that kind of comedy, or if you find that comedy difficult translated to written form, it might not be for you so much. But I really, really enjoyed this book. I think it was very funny in places. The first scene had me engrossed because it was just like reading a Monty Python sketch as far as I was concerned. And I really loved the characters, and that's what really pulled this through for me into a 4.5 star read, is that I loved the characters and I can see the journey we're going to be going on. I do like Vimes a lot, but I think my favourite has to be Carrot. I love him as a naive straight man to the rest of the Watch, and he's just a very, very funny and very wholesome and naive all at the same time. And yeah, the characters and the humour definitely carry this book. This does have more plot, or at least a more interesting plot to me than the other Discworld books I've read, which also helped. But yeah, a brilliant 4-star read for me, and definitely will hopefully be carrying on with Men at Arms sometime soon. We then move on to another novella. I think this one's definitely a novella length rather than a short story. And this is another one by Sebastien de Castell. This is Dance of the Chamberlain. This one is related to the Greatcoats. So this, if you've not read all 4 Greatcoats books, there are probably some incidental spoilers for the end of that series that you probably don't want to be dealing with if you are intending to read that series. I really like the new Greatcoat we are introduced to here. This is the King's Crucible, and yeah, I like the concept we've got here. It's very much a detective Poirot style fantasy story in the Greatcoats world. It's very interesting. I do like it a lot, and I think he's done pretty well. Again, another 4-star read for me. De Castell's doing very well with his novellas as far as I'm concerned, and I'm looking forward to reading the next couple of Greatcoats ones that are out now as well. So I'll be getting to them soon, hopefully. Next up is the one reread that I have had for this month, and this is continuing my Dresden Files reread at a slightly slower pace than previous months, so I've done a few. This one is book 6, Blood Rights, and it gets a 5-star rating from me. I love this series. I think it was down at a 4-star before this reread. In and of itself, it's not the most amazing Dresden Files book in terms of its self-contained plot, but I think what it sets up is incredible. There is so much foreshadowing here, which I think is done very, very well. And actually the changes that are happening for the characters here, for Harry in particular, and his relationships with other characters is a really, really big deal. Something else that probably didn't help my rating before is that when I rated this, I, for some reason, had taken one of the plot threads that I really liked, and for some reason I thought it happened in Death Masks in book 5. It doesn't. It happens here in book 6, which makes a lot more sense thinking about it. It would be very sparse on plot if that wasn't there. And actually, it's a set of scenes that are some of my favourite in the Dresden Files, and actually it's enough to bump this up to a 5-star read for me. So often I think I downplay how good specific Dresden Files books are because I compare them to other books in the series, and they're not as good as that. yet still they would be 5-star reads compared to a lot of other books that I read. So it seems silly that I had this down at a 4-star read. I think it is a 5-star read, even if it's one of the slightly weaker Dresden Files books. It's certainly not the worst by any stretch. And then moving on to the last book I finished this month, and that is The Blood of Gods. This is book 5 in the Emperor series by Connor Gordon. So going back to what I was talking about at the very start, when I was talking about The Gods of War, book 4, book 5 here is a little bit less interesting for me personally. And that's not because Gordon's writing's got worse. It's not because the characters aren't as consistent or anything like that. It's just purely who we end up following for the majority of this book. Because of where we are in the story, in the histories, we are following different characters a bit more. There are some characters we don't follow anywhere near as much. I'm trying to say this without spoilers. And yeah, that means that it's just not quite as interesting. It wasn't quite as gripping for me. It was still a good read. It's in at a 4-star. It might be a 3.5 star. I think it is the weakest in the series, but it's still a relatively decent ending. I think I prefer it being there than not. If it had ended on book 4, it was fine, but I like that we've got this ending to it where we really see what the aftermath of a lot of those things that happened in book 4 are. I still think it's a good solid book, at least a 3.5 star read. I think with a little bit more time, I might be a bit more solid on which of those ratings I'll give it. But definitely enjoyable. Definitely had lots and lots of fun with this series. It's my first real foray into a big historical fiction series. I would definitely recommend it if you love the Romans, if you love historical fiction, or if you want to get into historical fiction. I think it's a good place to slide into that genre. After that, I've not finished any more books, and I finished that on the 25th. So you can see that actually the last 6 days or so were spent churning my way through these bigger books that I've started reading that will get finished in September. All in all, a pretty good reading month for me, yeah? My lowest rating was a 3.5 star. A lot of 4-star, 4.5 star reads for me, and even one 5-star read that I really loved. So yeah, that 5-star read for me was a reread. I knew I was going to love it. But yeah, lowest a 3.5 star, the highest of my new reads, a couple of 4.5 star reads that I did really enjoy. There we go. Thank you so much for joining me for my August wrap up. I hope that's been informative. Maybe you've discovered some books or some thoughts on books that you've not seen before. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more from me, and hopefully I'll see you guys again soon.